Hello, and thanks for stopping by. My name is Jala, and welcome to One Jamaica TV. So today we want to show you a clip of the president and founder of the United Independent Congress of Jamaica. He was on Love 101 FM, the Morning Watch Show, hosted by Stokely Marshall and Dr. Delan Toussaint. So we want you guys to take a listen and tell us if you agree what the president was talking about or saying.
Welcome back to the Morning Watch. I'm your host, Stokely Marshall. We are in the first watch now. The issue of the World Health Organization, WHO's pandemic treaty or amendments to the international health regulations, as the case may be, is expected to be adopted by the 194 UN member states, and it appears to include Jamaica on the 27th of May this year, 2024, this year of our Lord, during the World Health Assembly, and it is again raising red flags. It is again meaning the whole matter of whether it is the pandemic treaty or amendments to the international health regulations or both. We wait to get clarity on that. Now, there are some unanswered questions and concerns stemming as far back as from 2022. Is the Jamaican government silent on the matter? Well, let us see. We have as our guests this morning to look at this and to consider what is taking place, President of one of Jamaica's political parties, the United Independence Conference, my humble apologies, Congress, Mr. Joseph Patterson. And we also have chair of the Jamaica Coalition for a Healthy Society, Dr. Wayne West. Good morning, President, or founder, I should say, Patterson. Founder Patterson, as well as Chair Dr. West. Good morning, gentlemen. How are you both?
Good morning, Mr. Marshall. Good morning, Mr. Walker.
Mr. Patterson, your microphone is you're coming across as being garbled, and we are having a challenge hearing you. I don't know if it is our end or your end, but whatever you think you can do on your end so that we can hear you better, it would be greatly appreciated while we see what we can do on our end. Can you make an attempt again, Mr. Patterson?
Sure. Is this any better?
A lot better. There is a little bit of an echo, but at least we're hearing you much better now. Dr. West?
Good morning. Good morning.
Great, gentlemen.
Good morning to both you and Mr. Patterson.
Good morning.
And of course, our listeners will want to hear what both of you have to say. Now, what, if anything, you understand the pandemic treaty to mean, and or the amendments to the international health regulations? Would you like to start, Mr. Patterson?
Sure. I mean, first of all, that the need for collaboration with the rest of the world on dealing with pandemics or anything of an international nature like that is necessary. The challenge we have as a people here in Jamaica is that our governments and oppositions tend not to be able to think for themselves and to act on behalf of the Jamaican people, but mostly to be a rubber stamp and to cut and paste and kind of do whatever they're told by the global elite. So that's really where our concern is. And having a pandemic treaty where the people of Jamaica are not consulted and not engaged in the process to know what this really means, and allowing for all kinds of speculation as opposed to just having the kind of communication and consultation to give the people confidence that our government is working on our behalf, that is seriously lacking. And that is really where, my concern lies, a failure on the government's part to engage Jamaican people and a history of our government failing to stand up for us and allowing others to direct the agenda of Jamaica.
Dr. West, any comments from you? And would you like to weigh in or indicate anything about the May 27th date, which we are hearing about?
Yes, well, the problem of a pandemic is a serious thing. And I agree with Mr. Patterson. We really need to have collaboration across the world to deal with the issue. The question is WHO, who will be playing the major role in both the international health regulations and the World Health, the WHO pandemic treaty, has it shown itself to be up to the task of dealing with the issues? We just need to look at what happened in COVID-19. In COVID-19, the WHO and the many governments obviously collaborated to develop an approach in which only the narrative, which was developed by the quote-unquote by science, which wasn't really developed by science at all, was allowed to be heard and implemented. For example, there was no attempt was ever made to use therapeutic intervention, in other words, medicines to treat COVID. Any attempt to do so was poo-pooed and referred to as being, poor science. The only recommendation coming out of WHO and the government, think about the government of Jamaica, the only recommendation they had was that when you were sick, you wait until you basically became so ill you went to hospital. They never suggested any therapeutics like, in fact, things like ivermectin, which was suggested, were immediately rejected. But when you look at the outcomes of the COVID-19 pandemic, we find that countries that were less vaccinated had fewer deaths. For example, I can give you some figures. Nigeria, when its vaccination rate was 28%, it had 14 deaths per million population. This is as opposed to the United States, which was 69% vaccinated. This was sometime in 2022. And they had 3,099 deaths per million. So the narrative that you needed to get this vaccine in order to achieve the best result is not at all justified by the data. Trinidad and Tobago had a vaccination rate of 47%. Jamaica's one was 26%. Whereas Trinidad and Jamaica had 1,066 deaths per million, whilst Trinidad and Tobago had 2,880 deaths per million. So there was an official narrative which was only allowed to be aired. Anything else was rejected and suppressed by both the mainstream media and the government. Yet still, when you look at the outcomes, you find that that official narrative somehow or the other did not match up. I just want to make one other point. It was stated, for example, that you must have lockdowns. But Sweden did not have lockdowns the way we had lockdowns. In fact, Sweden did not close its schools, its kindergarten. And when you look at the deaths per million in Sweden, they are less than other comparable countries. So the problem we have with the WHO treaty and the international health regulations is that they are concentrating power in the hands of the WHO. But the WHO hasn't shown itself to be effective at managing the COVID-19 pandemic. Gentlemen, so the question is, why should we concentrate power in the hands of an organization that has not shown itself to be competent?
Listeners, please stay with us. We'll be right back on the Morning Watch. Just before the break, Dr. West, you were speaking about, I believe it was Sweden, and their experience in the recent COVID restriction period, sir?
Yes, I was saying that, the general policy arrangement or coming out of WHO and other countries was that you need to lock down, the way we locked down in Jamaica. But when Sweden didn't do that, and they had better results than countries that did. So the problem, what we are saying is that the way the COVID-19 pandemic was handled was very authoritarian, and WHO's results are not better than other people who didn't follow WHO.
Dr. West, if I might ask a question, just for clarity. When you say Sweden had better results, what exactly do you mean?
The deaths per unit of population was less than countries that did lockdowns.
Oh, I see. And Dr. West, any comments in relation to the May 27th date? And is it that there is sometimes you hear about the adoption of a pandemic treaty, and then sometimes you hear about amendments to the international health regulations, otherwise known as the IHR? Which is it?
It's both.
Oh.
It's both. The international health regulations is a legally binding document arrangement, which has been in existence, I think, since about 1969 and was reviewed in 2005. There are recommended revision based on the experience with the COVID-19 pandemic. And again, those recommendations are concerning because Article 3 of the international health regulations was previously based on the principle, but let me just read for you, the implementation of these regulations shall be with full respect for the dignity, human rights, and fundamental freedom of persons. They wish to change that to remove the concept of with full respect for the dignity, human rights, and fundamental freedoms of persons, and change it to shall be based on the principles of equity, inclusivity, coherence, and in accordance with their common but differentiated responsibilities of the state parties, taking into consideration their social and economic development. Now, those are words. What we know that the people who wish to make changes to the international health regulation, they want to remove our freedoms and our dignity and human rights. Much of what happened under the pandemic, when they were forced to take vaccines, etc., and human rights were abused, and courts are now ruling against some of those things. So what we're saying is that both the international health regulation and the WHO pandemic treaty are being discussed. What will come out of them depends on what the people who are negotiating decide.
Two things.
But definitely there is an attitude of authoritarianism in the approach to managing these issues.
Dr. West, you mentioned people were forced to take vaccines. What do you mean by forced to take
the vaccine mandates? Vaccine mandates, yeah, absolutely. There are persons who you couldn't, I just up to recently, I saw an item coming out of a bank in Trinidad who demanded that before you can come to an interview, you must be vaccinated.
An interview for a job?
Yeah, an interview for a job.
I understand. Anything on the May 27th date before we go back to Mr. Patterson? Anything on the May 27th date?
Well, we are hoping that this authoritarian approach to managing the pandemic and this suppression of information, that attitude would be resisted, and we will come up with something that if WHO is spreading information that is not useful, but other people have information that is useful, like Nigeria, which is lower deaths per million, that they would be discussed in the mainstream media. There was a policy during the COVID pandemic that the only thing that was considered worthy for discussion in the mainstream media is vaccination. No other approach.
Mr. Patterson, the May 27th meeting or forum, as the case may be, in relation to the World Health Assembly, any comments on that? What is expected to be done on that day? And do you have any concerns in relation to Jamaica and the Jamaica position?
Sure. Well, we know what's going to happen on May 27th in terms of the protocols that are going to be followed.
What exactly is to happen on May 27th, if I may quickly interject?
Sure. Well, basically, they're going to go through their process of coming to what they consider a consensus on what they're trying to do. But I think for the Jamaican people, our real concern is the fact that we cannot trust our government, we cannot trust the World Health Organization, we cannot trust the international health regulations that they're going to put forward. And I think the case has been made clearly that based on the track record, based on all the evidence so far presented, that Jamaica's best option is to leave the WHO. Because the WHO, in its efforts so far to save us from pandemics, have only caused us more harm. And so Jamaica needs to say, like others, that listen, as long as this body is not going to respect our rights and freedoms as individuals and our collective sovereignty as a nation, we cannot be party to that kind of thing. But I don't expect that to happen, of course. I'm only saying that. Jamaica does not have a government that is committed to protecting the individual sovereignty of our citizens, nor to protect the collective sovereignty of our country. And Mr. West pointed them out nicely. First, you realize they're not interested in protecting freedom of speech. They're not committed to protecting freedom of movement and freedom of association. And they're not committed to protecting freedom of choice. Now, in September 2021, on the 22nd of September, that's why the UIC went out and had that march on Parliament, for which I was arrested. And, Mr. West nicely pointed out the point that 22% of Jamaicans were subjected to this injection. And by the way, the UIC has never been opposed to vaccines. What we're opposed to is your right being removed for you to make a personal choice whether or not you want to take this kind of thing. But on September 22nd, 2021, we made it very clear to the government and the people that we're willing to stand up for the rights of Jamaicans. And the good thing is, the Jamaican people responded and resisted the attempts of the government to coerce them, or to force them, or to con them, or trick them, or bribe them into taking something they don't want to take. And so today now, I believe the Jamaican people, through our various groups, whatever you are, whether you're a political party or a non-profit or any form of civil society groups, we have to join our voices together and make it very clear that regardless of what decision is taken by those who are meeting concerning the pandemic treaty, let us stand up to the world and to the government of Jamaica and make it clear that we, the people of Jamaica, will not be subjected to any rules or regulations that denies us our collective sovereignty or our individual sovereignty.
Well, it is indicated that the pandemic treaty is expected to be adopted by the 194 UN member states, including Jamaica, on May 27th this year, 2024. And some may say, well, what is the issue with that? Why are we making heavy weather of it? In fact, some persons might say, well, nothing is wrong with multilateralism, or whichever word you wish to use. So, Mr. Patterson, some other persons, on the other hand, on the flip side, will make the argument that, in a manner of speaking, any country which is party to this treaty would be, as it were, divesting itself of its sovereignty. But I think the WHO has indicated that that is not so. So what are some of the sovereignty issues you may have vis-a-vis some of the other issues you may have, Mr. Patterson, if any?
Sure. I mean, the key thing is, Mr. Marshall, is that even without a legally binding treaty, as you know, some people are talking about whether it's legally binding or not. You saw that the government of Jamaica followed verbatim whatever was told to it by this body. So our government, we know, have a tremendous appreciation and confidence in the WHO. So I'm not worried about the WHO. I'm worried about our government. Our government doesn't seem to have the ability to stand up and say, here is our position and here is why. We just heard, for example, the goodly Mr. West articulated all of the reasons why we should not have confidence. Dr. West, sorry. But what you don't hear from our government is any concerns. They have not come back to the Jamaican people and said, we are sorry for imposing on you what we did during COVID, for locking down the nation, for depriving our children of education, for forcing people to take this injection indirectly, using employers to force Jamaicans into this, costing people their jobs and severe amount of stress. And they have not apologized, nor have they committed to having a commission of inquiry to review what has happened. Instead, they have just moved on. So we know we can't trust them. So my contention is not with the WHO. They're doing what they're doing. We know how they're funded. We know how they're controlled. We can see clearly what their agenda is. But what is the agenda of our government? What is the agenda of the opposition party in our government? What are they putting forward to Jamaican people? What are they putting forward to the world? Jamaica used to be a nation where you have some statesmen who can stand up on the world stage and explain and advocate and articulate on issues of international import as well as local importance, and be able to get the people of Jamaica behind them to say why we need to stand up for certain things and stand against certain things. We don't have that in Jamaica. So the UIC's position is this: we have to stand up against our own government and let them know that we're not going to be party to whatever treaty they may sign. So they may go ahead and sign a treaty to give away our sovereignty to unelected people, persons who are unaccountable, and who they're then going to follow and say they're just following what is commonly accepted by 194 countries. But I think at the beginning of your program, Mr. Marshall, you made a very lovely quotation that if something is wrong and everybody is doing it, that doesn't make it right. I'm just paraphrasing here. And so even if they manage to get 194 countries, including the government of Jamaica, to sign on that, we, the people of Jamaica, must say to that government and must say to that opposition that we, the people, have signed on to it and will not be subjected to it.
Understood, Mr. Patterson. I'm not sure if the way of entering into this treaty or arrangement would be by signature or if it would be by some other means. There are various ways of entering into a treaty. Dr. West, can you shed any light on that? Or any final word you want to leave with us?
I think you have to sign a treaty. But let me just repeat that the international health regulation is already binding. So if there are changes which give authority to the Director General, as there are in the changes that are suggested for the international health regulations, it will be binding on us and we will lose our sovereignty. And the language is such that there is less discussion and more imposition, and that is a fact.
We are.
Let me just say, we have found WHO to be lacking, to be wanted, and we should not hand over our sovereignty to them.
Were you quite through, Dr. West?
I was saying that we have found WHO recommendations to be wanted, so we should not hand over sovereignty to them and develop authoritarian strategies to manage a pandemic.
Have to leave it there. Dr. West and Mr. Patterson, thank you for your time and for your thoughts. Listeners, please stay with us. We'll be right back on the morning one.
So we want you to tell us whether you agree or disagree with what the president is talking about. Yes, we appreciate you interacting with the channel. So just go over there in the comment section and give us your feedback. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And reach out to the UIC because the movement is in need of your help. All the information, the links will be in the description. Until then, my name is Jala, and thanks for watching One Jamaica TV.